Founder of Stop Animal Exploitation Now. His name is Michael Budkie. Please welcome him.
Good morning. My name is Michael Budkie, and I am one of the co-founders of SAEN, Stop Animal Exploitation Now, and our organization exists for one purpose and one purpose only. We exist to eliminate animal experimentation. Now, being an animal rights activist is not something that I ever intended to do. Not long after, just a few years after my wife and I were married, we found out that we had one thing in common. We have always had a very strong connection to and affection for animals. And so I decided to go back to school. And I decided to get a degree in animal health technology. Little did I know at that time that that was essentially going to place me as a student inside an animal laboratory. And the things that I saw and the things that I was taught how to do literally changed my life. There are a lot of very unpleasant memories that I have that are associated with that period, and I'm only going to discuss a couple of them here. One of them is I remember just walking down a hall one day on the way to a classroom, and I happened to turn my head and look into the wrong room. And I literally stood there in horror and watched as a rat was decapitated. One of the other memories I have from having been inside an animal laboratory is that this laboratory, the University of Cincinnati, used dogs and cats. And at one point, there was a dog that came in that was, if not actually a litter mate, essentially virtually identical to one of the canine companion animals that was in our home at that time. The fur was the same, the mannerisms were the same, the coloring was the same. The only thing that was different was the gender. And so as you can imagine, I became very attached to this dog. I took him in extra food, I took him in treats, I took him on walks as much as I could. You couldn't take them out of the building, but I did at least exercise him as much as was possible. And then one day, I went down to that run where I had always found him, and he was quite simply gone, and he never ever came back. I knew what researcher had taken his life. I knew where the laboratory was located, and I knew almost exactly what had happened to him. And I had done nothing to stop that. I failed that dog, and I failed every other dog that was used in that research protocol. In the 1980s, when all of this was going on, the silence about animal research in this country was deafening. Very few people knew that it happened or knew anything about what was going on and what happened to the animals. But silence is something that's not just a part of exploiting animals in laboratories. Silence is key to exploiting animals and exploiting humans everywhere. Silence, our silence, is what allows animal exploitation and human exploitation to begin in the first place, and it is also what allows that exploitation to continue. And so just as we must speak up to prevent the exploitation of animals, we must also speak up to prevent the exploitation of our fellow activists. And just as we want animals to always be safe from harm, we must make sure that our workplaces and our events within the animal rights movement are safe places for everyone. After I completed my animal health technology degree, my wife Karen and I became involved with a local animal rights group. And we actually ended up taking on the university that I had just graduated from and forcing them to end one of the research projects that had been going on. This I'm not going to go into the details of that experiment, but we learned one thing from that campaign. We learned one undeniable reality, that in the fight against animal experimentation and in the fight against all animal exploitation, the most powerful weapon we have is the truth, facts, the reality of what's happening. It's up to us to make the world see what goes on inside animal laboratories and inside factory farms and inside circuses, because the exploitation industries that abuse animals intentionally hide this information. They don't want the public to know the truth. One of the truths, or one of the many truths about animal experimentation, is that it has almost nothing to do with science. Animal experimentation is all about money. In fact, in the United States, on an annual basis, we waste over $14 billion every year on animal experiments. And this is going on at a very high cost to human beings, because right now we're trying to figure out how to pay for health care in this country. How many people could we provide health care to for $14 billion a year? So when we do those animal experiments and we waste that money, we do not just hurt animals, we hurt people. And so we need to continue to speak the truth about what happens in animal laboratories. And I'll give you a few examples. In the last year, 7,700 animals in the United States in laboratories were killed, not as a part of experiments, but quite simply as a part of negligence in laboratories. The University of Kansas is one very good example. They killed dozens of animals through horrific negligence, which actually included accidentally setting a mouse on fire. Here in Indiana, Indiana University killed over 116 animals through negligence, which included starvation, dehydration, drowning, and accidental suffocation. Negligence at the University of Iowa killed over 244 animals. The causes of death there included starvation, hyperthermia or heat stress, and cervical dislocation. In other words, they actually intentionally broke their necks. Another horrific facility is the University of Massachusetts Medical School, who killed more than 30 animals through negligence, again by things like starvation, dehydration, suffocation, and in this case, decapitation. Oh, I almost forgot one of their other major accomplishments. Their staff at UMass is so incompetent, they can't actually even kill animals correctly. They were found to have living rats and mice in the carcass freezers. And so we need to ask one very simple question. If these laboratories cannot even do basic things like killing animals correctly, why should we believe they can do science? These are the facts of what happens in animal laboratories. We don't need to lie. We don't need to exaggerate. All we need to do is tell the truth. One of the problems we have sometimes with telling the truth is that the public doesn't give animal rights activists a tremendous amount of credibility. We are sometimes depicted as kooks, extremists. I hear the word terrorist very frequently. But if you're dealing with animal experiments, you don't have to worry about your own credibility, because because all of this information, actually the laboratories are very helpful in this way. All of this information is written down in their own documents. We don't have to make it up. We simply have to use the truth that they speak in their records and publicize that. And that's how we do things like changing public opinion. They do occasionally get some things right in the animal research industry. When we were going after the University of Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Society for Biomedical Research responded to the claims that we were making. They said, quite accurately, that our intent was to end the use of all animal models in medical research. They said that we go about doing it by chipping away little by little, eroding public trust. Finally, someone in the biomedical industry actually got something right. And essentially what we're doing is we are speaking truth to power. Speaking truth to power, getting the public to know the reality, has very real and concrete results. Speaking truth to power closed Harvard's Primate Research Center and emptied thousands of cages. Speaking truth to power closed the SimCool laboratory in Cincinnati, where hundreds of guinea pigs were literally forced to swim in toxic chemicals every year until they died. And speaking truth to power not only closed the Santa Cruz Biotech animal laboratories, it forced them to pay a $3.5 million federal fine. We're not only closing the laboratories, we're literally taking away their money. A Sherry Runner with the Chicago office of the Urban League had a very good quote about speaking truth to power. She said that speaking truth to power means believing deeply in what you say, fighting every day to have it heard. It may be popular, it may not be popular. It means taking a risk. It means standing for something. Standing for something isn't relevant only to our fight for animals. This must also govern how we treat each other. In the animal rights movement, we need to learn some basic truths. Our ethics needs to include not only animals, but our fellow activists and other animal rights organizations. On the most basic level, we need to learn that no means no. And this impacts not only our right to be secure in our own bodies, but it also impacts the arc of our work. And not having other organizations take credit for the small grassroots groups who are really making most of the accomplishments in this movement, simply so a larger organization can do fundraising. We must not step on other activists to move forward, because when we do, we rob the animals of people that are willing to fight for their freedom. In the final analysis, what we have to do is keep our eyes on the prize. The animal rights movement is about one thing and about one thing only: empty cages. We are not here to be concerned with our salaries. We're not here to worry about the size of organizational budgets, and we're not here to seek fame and fortune. We're here to liberate animals, and for that purpose only. The animal rights movement is about one thing, solely and entirely one thing: empty cages. The exploitations that we seek to fight and that we seek to end are not humane and cannot possibly be humane. There is no such thing as a humane animal laboratory. There is no such thing as humane slaughter. There is no such thing as a humane circus. There is no such thing as a humane fur. And anyone that tells you differently is quite simply lying. Not too long ago, there was an article that ran in Science magazine. It was called, the title of this article was, "A Cataclysmic Wake-Up Call. Can More Candor Win Back Support for Animal Research?" There's a reason that the biomedical industry is all of a sudden now trying to be more open and trying to have what they call candor, though I don't believe they know the meaning of the word. Because public opinion has changed. We have reached a tipping point, and the animal research industry is quite simply scared to death. A recent poll by the Pew Research Center showed that only 47% of adults in the United States support animal research. Over 50% oppose the use of animals in laboratories. Let me say that again. Over 50% of adults in the United States oppose animal research. The majority of the people in this country are on our side. The cataclysm that the animal research industry is worried about is all of us standing right here. We are not going to allow the laboratories to continue to lie to the public. We are going to tell the truth. We are going to speak truth to power. We are going to show that the reality of animal experimentation is starvation and dehydration and accidentally setting animals on fire. And oh, by the way, I forgot this one. Leaving them in cages where they're run through the cage washer and literally boiled alive. These are all things that have happened within the last year or two in laboratories that receive millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, in our federal tax dollars. Does leaving a non-human primate in a cage and sending that animal through a cage washer, does that sound like science? Not bothering to follow their own experiments, forgetting to use pain relief, which they always say is such a big part of their project, forgetting to give the animals veterinary care, having malfunctions where the animals literally drown in their own cages. That's not science. And so, to the biomedical industry, I would say one thing. Again, your cataclysm is standing right here in the middle of Indianapolis. The end of animal research is standing right here. The biomedical industry has only one thing to look forward to. They can sit back and watch as we use truth to close every single animal laboratory in the United States. Thank you.